You ever dance with the devil by the pale moonlight?
Welcome to the wonderful world of Strange Suspicion True Crime series.
I'm like, I still don't know what you're talking about. I'd like to speak to a lawyer. And he's like, a lawyer cannot help you right now.
He told us that you said to him, look, a lawyer can't help you now.
That would be inaccurate.
You did not say that.
No, I would never deter anybody from contacting an attorney.
Hey guys, welcome to Strange Suspicion. If you are new here, please press subscribe. Thank you for joining us today, and I appreciate everyone for being here. Please like the video, comment in the comment section down below. Share the video with anyone you think will enjoy this video. Thanks for being here. Whoop, whoop, whoop.
Law enforcement agencies using college students as confidential informants. Tonight, two dramatically different tales of two student drug busts.
Okay, so potentially the max is 40 years in prison, $40,000 fine. You understand that?
Yeah.
Okay. Obviously, you're probably not going to get 40 years, but is it a good possibility that you're going to get some prison time? If you don't help yourself out, yeah, there is.
Many of us obviously already know his story. A young man attending North Dakota State College of Science in Wahpeton that got busted selling roughly $80 of marijuana on campus. He then became a confidential informant, tried to lower his potential sentencing, and later he was found dead near Wahpeton. As of today, the cause of his death is still unknown.
And unfortunately, guys, some college student lost his life over $80 in marijuana. It's awful. But this next guy, he was really a lot more prepared for this. He was asking for his lawyer. He said, I'm not going to do that. The police officer said that he was lying, and he stood his ground. He was like, nope, I guess they're lying, because they did ask him to do that. And he said he didn't want to make any deals until he talked to his lawyer. Still got his charges dropped and everything went his way, but I think it was probably because he intimidated the police officers in the police force who had asked him to do such a dumb thing for them. Unfortunately, when somebody loses their life doing something that the police officers are asking them to do immorally, we're not going to get the full story. And I think that's tragic. It's truly, truly tragic. This guy was also told that his interrogation was not going to be recorded as they were discussing this with him. And that is so wrong, guys. Like, I have heard, as well as all of you have heard, that there was possibly no recorded interrogation of Bryan Kohberger. And that raises a lot of red flags and a lot of eyebrows, because a lot of people think that is absolutely what you would do for an informant. It's really strange that somebody can conveniently not record an interrogation, or conveniently not have their body camera on, or conveniently forget something, or conveniently be near the scene of a crime, or not near the scene of a crime for a long, long period of time after it's reported, especially when you're a police chief.
You know what this means, don't you? If you're thinking what I'm afraid you're thinking, precisely, Chief O'Hara. The moment we've dreaded for years has arrived. This time, we're going to have to solve a case ourselves.
Or, I really don't know. Like he said, I could face up to 30 years in prison if I didn't help. If I didn't become an informant, this is the only time I could knock off years. Well, when I said, may I speak to an attorney, he said, an attorney can't help you right now. And when I got up and I was going to the door, he said, this is the only time you can help yourself. And I said, well, I'd like to speak to an attorney first. And he's like, nope. And then I walked out of the police station.
So obviously you just heard Jason Weber there in the opening soundbite where he denied ever doing that. What would you say to him if he was sitting here right now?
That he's lying.
Give me proof of that.
No, my interrogation, he told me that it wasn't going to be recorded before I sat down.
Well, I will say this right now. We want to know if it was recorded because, unfortunately, at least from what Tammy Sadek has told me, wait to hear this, the first time she ever saw the interrogation tape is when it was up online. She had no idea it was even out there. So let's move a little bit forward now. So you walk out, you lawyer up. The thing that I think is most important for people to understand is once you lawyered up, how did this thing all transpire?
Pretty much I had my preliminary hearing, and that went a whole entire year. And part of my bail, I had to take routine piss tests every week for about half a year. Then I got switched to every 2 weeks. And then I continued, then took my actual court, did the plea agreement, got 2 years probation, no jail time, and...
So you sold pretty much what Andrew sold.
Yep.
Go in, do a plea agreement, and we just heard very clearly there. Again, let me remind you, it was said to Andrew, if you don't do something to help yourself here, yeah, you're probably going to face some jail time. So let's just be clear with people. You went to the plea agreement, no jail time, 2 years probation, correct?
Correct.
Didn't spend any time in jail?
No time in jail.
So what does the probation consist of specifically?
I meet with my probation officer once or twice a month, and that's it.
So, and again, to be fair to Mr. Weber, do you think Mr. Weber maybe just doesn't know that? So it's not that he's lying to Andrew, he just doesn't know that in a plea agreement you're not going to get any jail time.
I'm sure he knows how they go down. It's happened before. But I can't be the only one that doesn't take the deal.
Anything else you want to answer? I appreciate doing this. I know it's not easy for you to do, so...
Another thing I find pretty odd, though, with the whole deal, I went through all that. Court, everything is done. And then I'm going to my probation and was offered a chance to make some money.
That's right, you and I talked offline. And so here's another interesting note. So this young man goes in front of the judge. Obviously he gets his hearing and whatnot, gets sentenced to his probation. Within that, correct me if I'm wrong here, the judge said to him, you cannot be allowed any drugs or even alcohol. Since that time, people in the system have offered him to go make money selling meth to help him pay off his car. Is that accurate?
Sniper, no sniping!
Kind of instigate to have me do that or make it seem like it seemed like a good idea, but...
But just to be clear, there's people in the system that were offering you the opportunity to go out, even though you'd never sold meth before, to go sell meth, correct? So buy from a dealer, try to hook that up,
and then repeat the cycle.
Being a military veteran, I know a lot about survival. And basically, the survival aspect in the military is that you don't leave anybody behind. But also, it could be a survival tactic for Brent Kopaka if he found out being an informant. Let's say he was an informant, Brent Kopaka, and he knew something was going sour. And he knew if he stepped into the house at 1122 King Road for a controlled buy as an informant, something bad was going to happen. It would be really smart for him to protect himself, to bring in a weapon that he had already been trained for in the military. Myself, I was trained with an M16, I was trained with combat knives, and I was trained with various weapons. But we were all trained with knives, and we were all trained with guns. So for him to be carrying a knife on him would be a very easy thing to do, being that maybe as a veteran with a traumatic brain injury, he was unable to obtain ownership of a firearm. Which could be why people noticed that Brent Kopaka was collecting knives, because there's a level of fear when you've seen too much. And because he spent 4 years in Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan, the PTSD that comes along with something like that, 4 years of exposure to death and violence, it's real easy to have a level of fear and want to be protected. He could have entered 1122 King Road with the intention of going to a controlled buy. On the way to that, being nervous, he could have been doing drugs with somebody in a car. Someone like Bryan Kohberger, who does drugs, who lives right near Brent Kopaka. Makes sense to me. Maybe I'm totally off here, but what if they were driving around together and they were cutting up coke with the knife that he was going to use to protect himself in case something went wrong? Then he brought the knife in after Bryan had touched the knife and he had touched the knife, and they were going to sell him some substance, whatever that substance is. And he told Bryan, you know what, drive around, because it would be very smart for a confidential informant who doesn't really have any protection from either side of the justice system to not want to, push the envelope, so to speak. So you would get somebody else to drive you, somebody else who wanted drugs. So being that Bryan Kohberger used drugs to calm his visual snow and allow himself a little relief from his pain, to come right along with him.
Allegedly.
To the buy. To drive. To cover Brent Kopaka in case something went bad for him.
Speculation.
Maybe so that the drug traffickers wouldn't see his car. Who knows? But the point is, Bryan Kohberger could have been driving around waiting for Brent Kopaka, or driving around with Brent Kopaka for whatever reason, even if they weren't informants. Just driving and driving around. That's what people do sometimes. It's kind of relaxing and fun, and it's nobody else's business. But it's important to remember that people are speculating on the fact that now the court would like Bryan to be more specific with his alibi. They don't want to hear that he was driving around, just driving around. They want to know where he was driving around, why he was driving around, who he was driving around with, if anybody. And then there's talk about an alibi witness. Interestingly enough, when Bob and I were discussing this, Bob came up with the fact that maybe the witness was like audio or video, like a dash cam, or
the actual car itself is a witness.
Or like an onboard software system. Something that a confidential informant would have in their car. Something that would safeguard them and prove their story without having to trust another human being. Perhaps now the verifier is audio or visual, which I find real interesting, because if Bryan Kohberger was the informant and he has studied and gotten a degree in cloud forensics, guys, he would have gone off their signal a bunch of times, being the informant trying to bust the people in that house for the drugs and the drug trafficking coming in and out of there. He would have to connect to that to know that at the right time for him to make the move to go in there to do the controlled buy, and then something went awry. So we don't really know what went on here, but I just wanted to make the fact clear that confidential informants are not required to speak. They're not required to prove their innocence. And when you're accused of a crime so huge, any crime at all actually, but a crime like being accused of killing Ethan, Xana, Maddie, and Kaylee, Bryan Kohberger does not need to prove his innocence. There is not a court in this country that requires a defendant to provide his innocence. It is for the prosecution to prove his guilt. Bryan Kohberger has done a fine job of sitting in that courtroom and standing silent. Perhaps he doesn't know what to say. But whether or not his alibi is vague, we have no reason to believe it's not true. It's important to know that sometimes the people that we trust, the people in authority, they're not always looking out for our best interests. But they will watch out for each other, and they will watch out for their own interests. And apparently the things that don't add up in this case aren't of value to Judge, and they aren't of any value to the prosecution, and they're not even made available to the defense. So, without any proof, without anything but assumption, there are many scenarios that we can consider when thinking about the fact that this case may or may not involve a confidential informant. But it's important to understand that having been any kind of confidential informant, Bryan cannot speak of any of it. That's the deal. It's a secret. That's why it's done before the interrogation. That's why it's done with the chit-chat on the way in the car. That's why it's done before they push record. Because it's immoral and it's not right. And the prosecution is not, as well as the defense attorney and the judge, are not required to release that information to the public. But it sure was interesting when he called him Bryan Kohberger.
No mercy shown here.
Didn't find any bodies, did you? What could these kids have possibly done to bring this much hell down on them?
Send this to someone who is always been accused of assassinating JFK. You are not alone, and I have created a fashion design for innocent warriors like us. My love language is you believing that I have nothing to do with the JFK assassination.
I love cemeteries because it's a very peaceful, quiet place to go where nobody but weirdos like me really want to hang. I don't go there just to hang out with the dead. The dead don't scare me, though. It's the living. I don't think that's weird, you?
No.
I don't hang out there at night.
Introducing glass beams.
River Crew. Weird Bob's Strange Minute.
First of all, fuck you!
The cloud.
They provided to law enforcement so you can determine at best who would be the culprit that had that information if you were initially involved with this confidential informant. There's a lot of cases where people impersonate people and confidential informants lie on people, and law enforcement also needs someone to corroborate specifically what the confidential informant told them about a subject. So for instance, if someone has told law enforcement something about you and law enforcement is alleging that they have a confidential informant, they need an independent person to corroborate what that confidential informant said about you in order for it to be valid. Now,
confidential informants. Are you serious, guys? It sounds like the most dangerous thing anybody could ever do. A confidential informant is an expendable person, both by the police department and from the judicial system. They have to worry about both sides of justice, meaning that on this hand, they have to worry about the district attorney, and on this hand, they have to worry about the people that they're being confidential informants against. And in this case, if there were confidential informants, it seems to me that the issue here was drugs. So that we are clear, when you are arrested, you are read your rights. These rights state you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney, and if you cannot afford an attorney, the state or city will appoint the attorney for you, a public defender. So when you're read your rights, everything becomes official. At that point, before you're read your rights and you're brought into the interrogation room, they can wait. They can ask you questions and then say, I haven't read you your rights yet because you're asking for a lawyer. In a big high-profile case of like trying to take down a drug trafficking ring or a human trafficking ring or something serious like that, they're not going to read your rights right away. They're going to tell you they're not interested in you, they're interested in the big guy. Whether it's drugs or human trafficking, whatever we're looking at, whatever the case may be. The interesting part is the level of intimidation here, guys, is that, hey, you're being faced with this. We want to ask you if you're willing to do this, right? So being a young college student or being somebody who has a very, very bright future who's been caught with something, it could be very, very inviting and hard to resist some kind of deal. Now, if you ask for an attorney, they'll tell you that you can't speak to an attorney. And the reason for that is you cannot be promised anything at the time of your interrogation. Nothing. And you should never, ever answer any questions until you ask for an attorney. And as you can see here, that is the case. There was a college student who was arrested for selling $80 worth of marijuana. Come on, guys. If you don't do marijuana or you've never paid for marijuana, $80 worth of marijuana is not going to get you 30 years' time. But a police officer can certainly intimidate you if you're young enough and inexperienced enough, and perhaps it was the first time you even bought any marijuana.
What do you think about all this gang violence that's going on in the streets?
I don't know.
What do you think about charges against you?
I don't know what charges against me.
They didn't tell you the charges against you?
No.
Try to believe me. FBI usually does that. That's the law. They didn't tell you what you charged with? You know Little Bo? What do you think of Little Bo?
I don't know him, man.
You don't know Little Bo?
No.
Are you in the John Doe's? What are they like?
Who is that? What that is?
John Doe gang. You know what it is.
I know what that is.
Are you a gang member, sir?
No.
Where'd you get the teeth?
Thank you for joining us today, and we will hopefully see all of you on Thursday at 4:20. If you've not figured it out, we will be putting it in the community tab, but we did make reference to the community name that was chosen by this community. You guys got to pick the community name, and I hope you're happy with it because we will be using it in the future. Thanks for being here. I'll see you on Thursday at 4:20.
You ever dance with the devil in the pale moonlight? What? I always ask that of all my prey. I just like the sound of it.
We gotta figure this out, guys. Stay suspicious.